So Sakazuki is a problem, but not in the way you may think. So the European One Piece Nationals just finished, and no surprise that Sakazuki took it all. It was pretty much full of Sakazuki in the top 16, same thing with the top 8, and obviously in the top 4 in finals. It should be no surprise at this point, I've commentated and been involved in a number of different tournaments, and as well as made other videos, and pretty much every single deck profile mentioned Sakazuki for a reason. If you don't have a plan to play against Sakazuki involving a consistent win rate, then you're gonna have a bad time in this upcoming NA finals. Not to mention, but just like any other card game, if you are playing a good deck, other people will play it, and it is no surprise that we saw this last weekend. You have to prepare for the mirror, and that is pretty much the problem. Sakazuki is a problem because it is a problem to himself. The problem that you have to solve is if you're playing him, then you basically have to prepare for the mirror. And if you are not playing him, then the problem you have to solve is that you have to prepare for him. You know, I'm almost there when it comes to saying that this is just like the Whitebeard meta where people are just playing the best deck. And honestly, you know, Whitebeard was very straightforward. It was there. It was just the deck where you don't really have to do too much to really think about what you're doing. You really have to make sure that you had enough cards in hand, you had enough counter, and that basically everything else didn't really have an answer to it. The reason why that's not the case here is that Sakazuki requires a lot of thinking, a lot of, you know, high ceiling potential, and the mirror is just not that fun. It's a very much of a seesaw type of thing. If you're trying to prepare for the mirror, the best thing I can really give you, or the best advice I can give you, is to try to maintain a higher board state in your Borsalinos, your 7 drops, and as well as your Mihawks, and as well as the 10 cost Kaido. And the reason why I say this is because you're less likely for them to be removed, and for you to more likely take the game while you have them on board. I hope that makes sense. And of course, you know, Borsalino at 4 and Mihawk now being teched into these latest decks makes sense because most of the time Borsalino and as well as Sabo are the two things that are going to protect you as Sakazuki. Anyway, this didn't really this video is not really to kind of talk about the matchup, the mirror and stuff like that. One, I don't have time for that. I'm still preparing the production for the live streams and as well as the recordings. Technically, I don't. Okay, this isn't supposed to be like a mirror matchup or to talk about the matchup. One, I don't have time for it because I'm still preparing for this week, obviously for the NA finals. I'm running the production for the streams and as well as a bunch of other stuff, let's just put it that way. And two, I don't want to give you ill advice. I think you should definitely, you know, watch out for the top players in NA, watch out what they're talking about and the people who have topped before. One of the things I did want to go through is pretty much the breakdown, the leader breakdown / player breakdown for the European finals. And this is all Swiss, which involved 2,560 players, which you can probably safely assume they're going to have similar numbers for North America. And of course, I don't think that they were doing Card Fest. It's a little bit different for us here in America because they're conjoining everything for some reason and not having a big finals. And I honestly think that we can probably have a 5,000 player tournament if we really tried, if we really pushed for it. Because honestly, like if it was capped at 2,500 or something similar to that, then yeah, it sold out pretty quickly. Then I'm pretty sure we can hit 5,000. Let me know in the comments if you believe the same. However, for this, it is actually very interesting. You know, we have, and at the same time, not really. We have the big three, right? We have Sakazuki. We have Yellow, which involves NL and as well as Katakuri, and then Monkey D. Luffy, the purple one, right? And what's interesting is that I think what, you know, barring Sakazuki for now, I think the interesting part is the Yellow split, right? Where I think Katakuri and as well as NL, it really just comes down to what kind of playstyle that you want and what do you think or what do you value when it comes down to the card pool. And NL really does take really good advantage of a lot of the Skyline stuff. It's just built for it, right? Yamato is a huge part of his deck pool and as well as card pool, along with sprinkling in the big moms. where 7-drop and as well as Katakuri all really help Enel. You know, especially since we saw it on stream. Shout out to them. They made it was a great stream. This came directly from them. I forget the name, but I know Jomek was the one who organized it. So whoever did this, if you want to get into my DMs, let me know. I'm more than happy to talk through some cool stream stuff. Anyway, Enel is really cool. It is very difficult to play against. It is a great RNG deck for a tournament. It is consistent enough to do kind of the same thing over and over again, especially if you do loop Shirahoshi with the 8-cost Katakuri, and then you draw into your Yamatos, and you kind of have answers for a lot of different things, as long as you don't kind of brick out through having like a lot of non-counterable cards in your hand. Which even then, like a lot of the cards like Sanji, a lot of things like Beige and things like that, those are still really good in yellow, where it's going to save you in your life, which you get a couple extra life every single turn that you play Yamato. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, the Katakuri part of it, you know, I'm a fan of Katakuri. I like him. I still haven't built. It's literally right here, and I think the reason why people went through him with him is, again, the consistency of being able to be aggressive against decks like Enel, decks like Sakazuki, decks like even Newgate, right? Those type of things. And it's just that constant extra pressure that Katakuri really brings. And against Enel, you can manipulate their life, being able to avoid different landmines and understand what to expect, because that's one of the things going against Enel that really is kind of annoying, that you don't know what to expect when taking game. And Katakuri kind of solves that. Sure, it still happens, but you know, it is one of those things where you can still play 9 costs or 10 costs Big Bomb, which again is a huge proponent for playing Katakuri. Anyway, those are my thoughts. 778 Sakazuki is pretty crazy. That's what, a fourth of the field. Not surprised. It is easily the best deck, and it proved it by winning the entire thing as well. It's not much to say about it, man. I've talked it to a dead horse. There's not really too much to talk about. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in a separate video was kind of understanding the triangle of where everything is as a leader, right? So the tier 1 decks are going to be the yellow decks, Sakazuki, Monkey D. Luffy, right? Monkey D. Luffy is still a tier 1 deck versus literally everything else that's not in the tier 1, right? It is on the bottom end of tier 1, and it's still really good, and it can still do really well against yellow. It's just that sometimes it's just fighting against itself, right? And that is more specifically making sense when you really think about again the top cut, which we're gonna take a look at in a second. But I really do think Purple Luffy is awesome. It gets there a lot of the time when it is allowed to get there. Sakazuki creates that, and the yellow decks just make sure that it creates a bigger variance from their life, and as well as having a better longer game, because Monkey D. Luffy, I feel like, doesn't have much of a long game versus the other 3 decks. Anyway, not really going to go through all of them, but the interesting thing is that the conversion rate for Zoro, which we'll look at in a second for the top 64, is really good. 118 Zoro being the 5th deck outside of Red Purple Luffy, or not Red Purple Luffy, but Purple Luffy being the 4th. Kind of not surprised, right? I think this is the pick where, you know, Zoro and as well as Newgate, which, you know, I made videos on it. I talked about it. I've talked about how they're still really good, and no surprise that they got into some of the top cut. But you know, Zoro kind of is a little hurt against all of the Sakazuki, right? Against yellow and maybe even against purple. It does pretty well, and that's kind of been the case since the inception of the card game, right? Zoro just sort of puts out everything. If you can't deal with everything, then you just die. And has access to a lot of cool things. Ignores a lot of the blockers through Diable, and as well as the 5-cost Luffy, etc., etc. You get the point. And I think this was a pick where people were just like, I am tired of yellow and I want to beat yellow. so they picked Zoro. So I think that's really what it was. And if they understood the Sakazuki matchup to make it a good 50-50, maybe 45-55, I think that's one of the other parts of picking Zoro. Personally, I didn't even bother because sometimes it just felt like a very losable matchup. And it didn't feel good to play against Sakazuki as Zoro, because as soon as you start establishing, even if you get like 3, 4, 5 1-drops on the board and you start attacking with them, you don't get to attack with them because they're already dead. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Newgate, hey, 99 of them, cool. He's the underdog here, which is super interesting. If Sakazuki didn't exist, would Newgate be the top dog? I have no idea. It's kind of hard to say. And we have the red purple Luffy, which again is part of the 1.5, right? So I talked about the triangle or where everything is. Tier 1 was Sakazuki's category and Nell, and then purple Luffy at the bottom end of tier 1, and then tier 1.5 is where that Zoro, Newgate, red purple Luffy, and Law, technically, I guess. I would say the red green Law, not the red purple Law, but hey, people tried it out, and I don't think any of them actually ended up being in the top cut. So that's a bummer there. Shout out to the 38 players who were confident enough playing Bello Betty. Hey, shout out to them. Big shout out. And as well as Ace, 17 Ace. I love that. Hopefully I had some sort of influence on that, but I highly doubt it. I don't think I have any influence. And then 24 Nami, with one of them getting a top cut and doing pretty well. It got pretty far. Don't know the list, but every time someone asks for a list, you already know. You already know that it's going to be the same list as literally any other time. So I don't expect anything too crazy in that list, I think. Shout out to them. I love it. I love Nami. And 12 black Sakazuki is crazy. 12 green purple Dofi. I don't think it was the play this time. Same thing for Kid. Kid is great. I made a whole video of green, and green is pretty much the forgotten child of the One Piece card game right now. And it's kind of a bummer, but also not really. And, you know, Kinemon had his time. Kid had his time in the first couple sets, so it's not really too much to complain right now. Blue, black, and as well as yellow is the boys. And here is the top 12 or top 2, top 64, whatever. What am I saying? Day 2 top 64 breakdown, which all of them went to top cut, right? So all of these are decks that went to top cut. The one Nami actually caught there, which is pretty sick. And I think it got top 16. I'm pretty sure top 16, top 8. I didn't really pay attention, unfortunately. Only saw some of it. But what's really cool is, again, the conversion rate of Zoro. And I think a bunch of that is the fact that a lot of people just were not expecting to see Zoro as a yellow player. And if you didn't know the matchup, or if you weren't used to it, then you probably got ran over, to be honest. I think it was just too much. Regardless of the triggers, you don't really care about them if you're just spending 1 or 2 Dawn to play a card. So that's kind of my whole think about it. And 28 Sakazuki, no surprise, not really too much to talk about there. Almost half of the field, but 11 Zoro is pretty interesting and pretty sick. And then 10 and L, 6 category, 5 purple Luffy, pretty much on par of what we've been talking about and what I've been talking about for the last few weeks. Not too surprising. This is pretty much what you're going to be seeing this upcoming week. There's not much you can do to combat it. I think Zoro was I'm going to combat this meta, and I'm going to try to keep quiet about it, which happens a lot with card games, and as well as Bandai card games, is that a lot of people don't really talk about what they're going to be playing for nationals. And if they do, sometimes they switch it up at the end of the moment, or other times teams and as well as group of people, friends, even content creators like myself might just be testing something that, hey, if in order for this to be successful, I cannot tell people until the day of the event, which makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think Zoro was that deck. So I expect a good amount of Zoro when it comes down to Cardfest and as well as the Nationals. If we don't, well, that's not really too much to say. I think maybe this was a wake-up call for people to start playing testing against Zoro in general. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I blabbed enough. Sorry, I'm not going to be making much content really at all for the next couple weeks. Just to give you a heads up. But maybe I'll take you guys with me on the production experience to Cardfest. We'll see. I'll see you next one.